My father slapped me so hard that the glass in my hand flew across the patio and shattered beside the grill. For half a second, nobody moved. The burgers hissed over the flames. A little boy stopped running with a water balloon raised above his head. My aunt froze with a bowl of potato salad pressed against her stomach. Even the music coming from the speakers seemed suddenly too loud. My cheek burned. My father, Grant Lawson, stood inches away from me, breathing heavily through his nose, as if I had struck him first. "You will not embarrass me in front of my family," he said. His family, not our family, not the people I had spent the entire morning feeding, seating, entertaining, and pretending still cared about me. His family. I slowly turned my face back toward him. Behind his shoulder, my older brother Tyler was leaning against the outdoor bar, with a beer in his hand. He wasn't horrified, he was smiling. Not broadly enough for anyone to accuse him of enjoying it, but enough for me to understand that he did. My mother, Denise, finally stepped between us. For one foolish second, I thought she was going to protect me. Instead, she grabbed my wrist. "Brooke, look what you've done." I stared at her. My cheek was swelling beneath my fingertips, broken glass covered the patio, and somehow I was still the problem. "What I've done?" "You provoked him," she whispered sharply. "You knew how important today was." Tyler lifted his beer toward me. "She always does this," he said. "She waits until everyone is together, then finds a way to make herself the victim." A few relatives looked down at their plates. Nobody challenged him. My father pointed toward the folding table, where a leather folder sat beside the birthday cake my mother had ordered for Tyler, his 36th birthday cake, at my father's annual family barbecue. Because in our family, every gathering eventually became a celebration of Tyler. "Sign the papers," Dad said. "Then we can forget this happened." A laugh almost escaped me, not because anything was funny, because even after slapping me in front of 40 people, he still believed the problem was unfinished paperwork. I looked at the folder. Inside was a transfer agreement granting Tyler exclusive control of the product division I had spent 7 years building inside Lawson Outdoor Living, our family's struggling patio and outdoor kitchen company, the division Dad used to call my expensive little experiment, until it became responsible for 68% of the company's revenue. Then it became Tyler's future. "You invited me here to make me sign away my work," I said. Dad's mouth tightened. "I invited you here because I expected you to behave like a daughter." "No. You expected me to behave like an employee you don't have to pay." That was when Tyler stopped smiling. Dad stepped closer again, but this time several people noticed. My uncle Raymond shifted away from the grill. My cousin Paige lowered her phone, although I could still see the camera pointed in our direction. My mother squeezed my wrist harder. "Please," she whispered, "don't make this uglier." I looked at the red marks her fingers were leaving on my skin. "Dad just hit me. And I'm asking you not to destroy your brother's future over one emotional moment." There it was, not Brooke's face, not Brooke's humiliation, not Brooke's years of work. Tyler's future. Always Tyler's future. I pulled my wrist free. Tyler placed his beer on the counter and walked toward us with the relaxed confidence of someone who had never been told no for long. "Let's stop pretending this is about your work," he said. "You've always known Dad wanted me running the company. Then maybe you should have learned how the company works." Several people inhaled quietly. Tyler's expression changed. He had spent years dismissing me because nobody ever made him prove himself. Dad introduced him as vice president before Tyler had managed a single account. Mom called him a natural leader because he wore expensive watches and spoke loudly during meetings. Employees were instructed to take his ideas seriously, even when those ideas were mine repeated 3 weeks later. But Tyler knew what everyone else at that barbecue didn't. He couldn't run the division without me. He didn't understand the supplier contracts. He didn't know why our largest retail partner had agreed to an exclusivity deal. He didn't even know that the modular fire pit system printed across our newest catalogs had been designed in my apartment after Dad rejected the first prototype as something no serious customer would buy. Tyler leaned closer. "You're good at organizing things, Brooke. I'll give you that. But organizing isn't leading." I glanced at Dad. He didn't correct him. Of course he didn't. 7 years earlier, when I joined Lawson Outdoor Living, the company had been 6 weeks away from missing payroll. Dad told me he couldn't afford a real salary, but promised I would be rewarded if I helped turn things around. I worked nights. I met suppliers on weekends. I rebuilt the inventory system after Tyler ordered nearly $500,000 of materials nobody wanted. When our bank threatened to reduce our credit line, I brought in the contract that saved it. Dad took the contract to a family dinner, raised his glass, and toasted Tyler for bringing a new energy into the company. I had been sitting beside him. Mom noticed my expression and whispered, "Let him have this. He needs confidence." Tyler always needed confidence. Dad always needed loyalty. Mom always needed peace, and I was always expected to provide all three, at my expense. Dad tapped the leather folder. "This agreement changes your title, not your compensation." "That's a lie." His face darkened. "You'll still be well taken care of. The agreement removes my approval authority, transfers my licensing rights to Tyler's division, and allows the board to terminate me without cause." The silence around us deepened. Some of my relatives clearly hadn't known that. Dad had described the papers as a routine leadership transition. He had spent the afternoon telling everyone I was receiving a promotion that would allow me to focus on creative projects, while Tyler handled the serious responsibilities. In reality, they were stripping me of every protection I had negotiated after learning what family promises were worth. Tyler shrugged. "If you're as valuable as you think you are, you shouldn't need protections, and if you're as capable as Dad says you are, you shouldn't need me to surrender mine." His jaw tightened. My father slammed his palm against the table. "This company carries my name and my work. I gave you that job. I saved that job." His hand moved before anyone could react. The slap knocked the glass from my fingers. Now, standing in the silence that followed, I realized something I should have understood years earlier. My father hadn't lost control. He had used violence because he believed it would restore control. He expected the shock to silence me. He expected my mother to contain the scene. He expected Tyler to watch. He expected everyone else to do what they had always done: look uncomfortable, say nothing, and later explain that family situations were complicated. Most of all, he expected me to sign. Dad opened the folder and placed a pen across the signature line. "Sit down." I stared at the pen. Tyler picked up his beer again. Mom smoothed the front of her blouse, as though the worst part was over. Around us, people slowly began moving. Someone turned down the music. Uncle Raymond returned to the grill. My aunt began collecting the broken glass with a wad of paper towels. They had decided the slap was finished. Now they were waiting for me to surrender so everyone could eat. I walked to the table. Dad's shoulders relaxed. Tyler grinned. "There," Mom said softly. "We can still save the afternoon." I picked up the pen. Then I drew one clean line through the signature block. Dad's smile vanished. "What are you doing?" I closed the folder and pushed it across the table, making sure nobody can claim I forgot to sign. Tyler stared at the black line cutting through the agreement. "You childish little—" "I'm not finished." I reached into my purse and removed my company phone, access badge, and the keys to the executive office Dad still referred to as his building, even though the lender had placed it under collateral restrictions 18 months earlier. I set all three on top of the folder. Mom's face went pale. "Brooke, stop." Dad looked at the badge, then at me. "You walk away today. You do not come back Monday." "That's the first honest thing you've said all afternoon." Tyler laughed, but the sound was strained now. "Go ahead, quit. Let's see how long you last without this family." I pulled out my personal phone. Dad mistook the movement for hesitation. "You have 5 minutes to calm down," he said. "Go inside, fix your face, and come back ready to apologize." I unlocked the screen. "I'm not apologizing." "Then you're done." "No," I said, opening the contact I had been avoiding for 3 weeks. "You are." For the first time, Tyler's confidence flickered. Dad noticed. "Who are you calling?" I pressed the button and raised the phone to my ear. The call connected after one ring. "Brooke," a man answered. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you today." "I know." I looked directly at my father. Grant Lawson had spent my entire life teaching me that power belonged to the person willing to take the most. What he never noticed was that while Tyler collected titles, I collected leverage. "I'm accepting your offer," I said. Nobody at the barbecue understood what those words meant, not yet. The man on the other end became very still. "Are you certain?" My cheek throbbed beneath the shape of my father's hand. "Yes." What changed? I watched Dad's expression shift from anger to suspicion. Then I gave the answer that would follow him for the rest of his life. My father made the decision for me. I ended the call. Dad stepped forward. "What offer?" I returned my phone to my purse. "One you told me I'd be stupid to refuse." His eyes narrowed. "Brooke." Behind him, Tyler had stopped drinking. 3 weeks earlier, the largest competitor in our industry had offered to acquire something my family didn't know I legally controlled. Not the company, not the building, not even the division Dad planned to hand Tyler, something far more dangerous. The patents, the licensing relationships, and the distribution platform every profitable product at Lawson Outdoor Living depended on. I had refused the offer because accepting it would devastate my family's company. Even after years of humiliation, I had still been protecting them. My father's palm had cured me of that weakness. I walked toward the gate. Mom hurried after me. "You cannot leave like this." I stopped but didn't turn around. "How should I leave, Mom?" Her voice lowered because relatives were listening. Quietly. "Give your father time to cool down. You know he doesn't mean things when he's angry." I finally faced her. "He meant the slap." Her lips parted. "He meant the papers." "Tyler meant every word he said. And you meant it when you blamed me." "That isn't fair." "No, it isn't." I opened the gate. Dad's voice thundered across the yard. "If you leave, don't call me when that offer disappears. Nobody in this industry respects you without the Lawson name." I looked back at him. Tyler stood at his side, clutching the transfer agreement that no longer had a signature line. My mother stood between us, still more frightened of my father's anger than of what he had done to me, and 40 relatives watched from behind paper plates and plastic cups, waiting to see whether I would fold. I smiled. Not because I felt strong, because I finally understood how weak my father actually was. He needed my silence. He needed my work. He needed my patents. He needed me to believe that leaving him meant losing everything. "You'll find out Monday," I said. Then I walked away from the family barbecue, with my father shouting behind me. Nobody followed, but before I reached my car, Paige's phone captured one final moment. Tyler asking Dad whether I could really take the patents, and my father answering loudly enough for everyone to hear. She wouldn't dare. He was wrong. By the time the first guests left that barbecue, the acquisition team had already reopened the contract. By midnight, 3 people would know what I had accepted. By Monday morning, every major retailer working with Lawson Outdoor Living would know. And before the end of the week, my father would stand in the same conference room where he had erased my name from every success and ask me to save the company he had just fired me from. But first, he was going to make one more mistake. He was going to send Tyler after me. The drive home should have been miserable. Instead, it was strangely quiet. Not peaceful. Not yet. But for the first time in years, nobody was sitting beside me telling me what I owed my family. Nobody was reminding me that Tyler needed another chance. Nobody was asking me to sacrifice one more piece of myself for the good of the company. The red mark across my cheek still throbbed every time I glanced into the rearview mirror. I didn't touch it. I wanted to remember it. Not because I intended to stay angry forever, because I never wanted to forget exactly what finally forced me to stop protecting people who had never protected me. Halfway home, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Miss Lawson, this is Brooke." "This is David Sullivan, the CEO, not an assistant. Not a recruiter, the CEO himself." "I wasn't expecting your answer until next week." I changed my mind. A brief silence. I assumed something significant happened. I looked at the fading outline of my father's fingers on my cheek. "You assumed correctly. I'll have legal prepare everything immediately. I have one condition." "I'm listening." "When this becomes public, I don't want rumors. I want facts." David didn't hesitate. "You have my word. We won't leak anything. We'll simply announce exactly what we're acquiring." Exactly. Not the company. Not the building. Not the Lawson name. The engine that kept the entire business alive. My patents. My licensing agreements. My exclusive supplier network. Everything my father believed belonged to him, simply because he had spent years taking credit for it. He didn't own any of it. I did. Because 7 years earlier, after one particularly ugly argument, I'd insisted every invention remain under my own intellectual property company. Dad had laughed. You think anyone cares whose name is on paperwork? Apparently, someone did. 40 minutes later, I walked into my townhouse. No television. No music. Just silence. My laptop sat exactly where I'd left it the night before. I opened it. 3 unread emails from Sullivan Outdoor Industries. 1 draft acquisition agreement. 1 licensing schedule. 1 escrow authorization. And 1 message from their legal department. Once signed, transfer becomes irrevocable. I stared at the sentence. Years. 7 years. Every late night. Every supplier relationship. Every design. Every negotiation. Every airport. Every rejection. Every success. All sitting inside those documents. Not because my father had built them, because I had. I reached for my mouse. Stopped. Closed my eyes. One memory appeared immediately. I was 26. Dad standing inside the warehouse. Tyler had just lost nearly $400,000 ordering imported inventory nobody wanted. Dad looked at me. I need you to fix this. I can. But if I do, you'll stop letting Tyler approve purchases. He laughed. Don't be ridiculous. So Tyler gets another chance? He's learning. And me? You're dependable. At the time, I thought dependable was a compliment. Now, I understood. Dependable people are expected to keep cleaning messes created by people everyone else refuses to disappoint. I opened my eyes. Signed. 1 page. Then another. Then another. When the final digital signature appeared, the screen displayed 1 sentence. Transaction initiated. I leaned back. There was no excitement. No celebration. Only relief. Years of carrying a company that refused to acknowledge me had finally ended. Across town, Dad's barbecue was ending. Tyler was still smiling. He loaded coolers into his truck. I told you she'd cool off. Mom looked uncertain. What if she doesn't? Dad slammed the tailgate. She always comes back. She has nowhere else to go. Tyler laughed. Monday morning she'll apologize. I'll let her keep her office. Dad smiled. Good. She needs to remember who built her career. Neither man noticed several relatives exchanging uncomfortable glances. Paige, Uncle Raymond, Aunt Lisa, even Grandpa's oldest friend, Harold Jenkins. Nobody mentioned the slap, but nobody had forgotten it either. As cars slowly left, phones started buzzing. Private messages, text chains, quiet conversations. Did you see what Grant did? Brooke never touched him. Someone recorded it. Does anyone know if she's okay? The silence protecting Dad for years was beginning to crack. Sunday morning, Tyler arrived at my townhouse without calling. He knocked once, then opened the screen door himself, exactly like he always had. Family didn't believe in boundaries. I opened the front door. What? He looked past me. No invitation? No. He smirked. There she is. Our dramatic little inventor. I'm busy. This won't take long. He stepped inside anyway. I didn't move. He walked through my living room studying everything. So this is where all the genius happens. I folded my arms. What do you want? Dad's giving you 1 chance. I didn't ask. He'll pretend yesterday never happened. I almost laughed. How generous. You apologize. You sign. You come back Monday. And everything goes back to normal. Normal. Such a dangerous word. Normal meant Tyler receiving promotions for my work. Normal meant Mom asking me to keep the peace. Normal meant Dad deciding my future whenever he needed another gift for his favorite son. No. His smile faded. You really think you're irreplaceable? No. I know I'm not. He frowned. What? They'll replace me. They just won't replace what I built. For the first time, he looked confused. What does that mean? It means Monday is going to surprise you. He took 1 slow step toward me. What did you do? I smiled. Exactly what Dad taught me. I protected my own interests. His face changed instantly. Not anger. Fear. Real fear. Because unlike Dad, Tyler had accidentally overheard enough board meetings to know one thing. The patents weren't company property. He tried hiding it. You wouldn't. I already did. His confidence disappeared. He grabbed his phone, calling Dad before he'd even reached his truck. I closed the door before he finished dialing. 38 minutes later, Grant Lawson's phone rang inside his home office. Grant, this is Melissa from First National Commercial Banking. I need to confirm something. He frowned. What? We've received notice that intellectual property, currently securing part of Lawson Outdoor Living's operating valuation, she paused, has entered a pending acquisition process. Grant stopped breathing. I'm sorry, what? Our legal department needs clarification. Has the company sold those assets? No, absolutely not. Melissa became quieter. The filing indicates the transfer originated from the registered owner. Grant's stomach tightened. Who? You'll need to review the documentation. The registered owner is Brooke Lawson. The room went completely silent. For the first time since slapping his daughter, Grant realized the biggest mistake he had made wasn't hitting her. It was believing she owned nothing worth taking away. He immediately dialed my number. I watched the phone vibrate across my kitchen counter. Dad calling. For years, I answered before the second ring. This time, I let it ring until the voicemail picked up. He called again, and again, then came the text. We need to talk. 5 seconds later, another one arrived. This isn't funny. Then another. Call me immediately. I looked at the screen for a long moment, then blocked his number. At that exact moment, across town, my father walked into the Monday executive meeting, believing he still had one last chance to fix everything. He had no idea the people waiting inside already knew more than he did. Monday morning, for 23 years, Grant Lawson had parked his black SUV in the space marked owner. He did it without thinking. Employees waved, receptionists smiled, managers straightened their posture when he walked past. Power became a habit long before it became a title. That morning, everything felt slightly different. Not obvious, just quieter. Conversations stopped a little too quickly. People avoided looking directly at him. His executive assistant Karen stood the moment he entered. You have an emergency board meeting in 15 minutes. I know. They've already arrived. Grant frowned. They're early? Karen hesitated. They asked to begin without delays. He nodded once. Where's Tyler? He went upstairs. Grant continued walking. His phone vibrated again. Another missed call from the bank. Another email marked urgent. Another notification from corporate counsel. He ignored all three. None of it mattered until he spoke with the board. Everything could still be controlled. It always had been. Upstairs, Tyler was pacing outside the conference room. The moment he saw his father, he walked over quickly. She's not answering. Grant kept walking. I know. I went to her house. I know. I think she actually sold something. Grant stopped. What exactly did she tell you? Tyler swallowed. She said they could replace her. But not what she built. Grant stared at him. What did you say? I told you yesterday, I didn't think she meant it. Grant rubbed his forehead. For years, he had convinced himself Brooke was too loyal to leave, too responsible, too attached to the company. He had mistaken loyalty for dependence. Those were not the same thing. At exactly 9 o'clock, the board meeting began. 5 directors, company counsel, chief financial officer, Grant, Tyler. No one smiled. The chairman, Robert Ellis, pushed a folder across the table. We've received notice from Sullivan Outdoor Industries. Grant remained calm. I'm aware. Robert looked directly at him. I don't think you are. He opened the folder. Inside was a complete summary of Brooke's intellectual property portfolio. Every patent, every licensing agreement, every registered industrial design, every software integration, every supplier exclusivity contract. Grant turned the pages slower and slower, until he stopped. His own legal counsel cleared his throat. Everything appears valid. Grant looked up sharply. Appears? Counsel nodded. We've already confirmed ownership through the Federal Registry. Tyler leaned forward. Okay. So we challenge it. Nobody answered. He looked around the room. What? Counsel finally spoke. There isn't anything to challenge. Tyler laughed nervously. What do you mean? If Brooke developed those assets personally, registered them personally, and licensed them personally, they belong to her. Grant slammed the folder shut. She developed them while employed by Lawson Outdoor Living. Counsel remained calm. Not under her employment agreement. Silence. Robert folded his hands. Grant, did you ever review Brooke's amended contract? Grant didn't answer. He hadn't. 7 years earlier, he had been too busy celebrating Tyler's promotion. Brooke had quietly insisted on revising her intellectual property clauses before accepting responsibility for the new division. Grant remembered laughing. Fine. If it makes you happy. He hadn't read a single page. Now, those pages were worth tens of millions of dollars. Across town, I stepped out of my car wearing the navy suit I normally reserved for investor meetings. The glass headquarters of Sullivan Outdoor Industries reflected the morning sunlight across the parking lot. A receptionist greeted me immediately. Good morning, Miss Lawson. Mr. Sullivan is waiting. I smiled politely. No one here called me Grant's daughter. No one called me Tyler's sister. No one introduced me as part of the Lawson family. Here, I was simply Brooke Lawson, inventor, founder, owner. Funny how differently the world treated you when people recognized what you had actually built. David Sullivan met me halfway down the hallway. He shook my hand firmly. I imagine this weekend wasn't easy. No, but necessary, he nodded. Our attorneys finished reviewing everything. And, he smiled. I honestly thought your portfolio was impressive. He paused. I didn't realize it was indispensable. Back inside Lawson Outdoor Living, the meeting was getting worse. The CFO connected his laptop to the projector. A spreadsheet appeared. Our projected valuation after the transfer. He clicked once. Drops 38%. Tyler frowned. That's impossible. The CFO clicked again. Our revolving credit facility depends on those assets. Another click. So does our insurance coverage. Another. And 3 pending expansion contracts. Grant looked toward the bank representative attending remotely. What happens now? The answer came immediately. If ownership transfers, our lending committee will require immediate reassessment. How immediate? Today, nobody spoke. The silence was almost physical. Robert broke it. Grant, why weren't these assets assigned to the company years ago? Grant looked toward Tyler, then toward the table, then nowhere at all, because assigning them would have required acknowledging that Brooke had created them. At Sullivan headquarters, legal documents covered the conference table. David slid the final agreement toward me. Once this is signed, the announcement goes live at noon. I looked at the first page. Asset purchase agreement. Everything was there. The patents, licenses, distribution rights, software, engineering files, vendor relationships, years of my life. Reduced to legal language. David noticed my hesitation. Second thoughts? I smiled. No. I was just remembering. What? The first time my father told me that ideas weren't worth anything. David raised an eyebrow. I suppose today proves otherwise. I signed. One final signature. The acquisition was complete. David stood. So, welcome. I shook his hand. Thank you. Before either of us sat down again, his phone vibrated. He checked the screen, then looked at me. You may want to see this. He turned the phone around. It was a video. 38 seconds long. The family barbecue. My father. The slap. Crystal clear. Someone had uploaded it less than 20 minutes earlier. Already, thousands of views. David looked back at me. Was this expected? I slowly exhaled. No, but it explains why my phone hasn't stopped vibrating. At that same moment, across town, every executive inside Lawson Outdoor Living received the exact same notification. Video. CEO Grant Lawson strikes daughter during family barbecue. Grant's phone buzzed. Then another. Then another. Karen knocked once before opening the conference room door. I'm sorry to interrupt. Her face was completely pale. "You need to see what's happening online." Grant took the phone from her hand. The video started automatically. He watched himself raise his hand, strike me, then order me to sign the papers. No edits, no missing context, just the truth. The room remained silent until the video ended. Robert Ellis slowly removed his glasses, then asked the question that changed everything. "Grant, were you trying to force your daughter to transfer company assets immediately before assaulting her?" Nobody in the room came to his defense. Not one person. Because for the first time, they hadn't just heard Brooke's version, they had watched it. Nobody answered Robert's question. Not because they didn't understand it, because they already knew the answer. Grant remained standing at the head of the conference table, his jaw locked, his breathing uneven. He placed Karen's phone face down. "It isn't what it looks like." Robert didn't blink. "We all just watched it." It was one moment, no. The company attorney finally spoke. It was several moments. He opened his notebook. "You struck your daughter. You demanded that she sign legal documents. And you threatened her employment immediately afterward." Grant looked around the room searching for support. For years, someone always stepped in. Someone always explained. Someone always softened the consequences. This time, no one did. Tyler finally cleared his throat. "Brooke has always exaggerated things." The CFO slowly turned toward him. "The video doesn't seem exaggerated." Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "You don't know what happened before someone started recording." Robert folded his hands. "Then tell us." Silence. Tyler opened his mouth, closed it again, then looked at his father. Grant answered instead. "She refused a leadership transition." The attorney interrupted him. "That doesn't authorize physical violence." Grant's face reddened. "I know that." "Then why did you hit her?" No answer. "Because there wasn't one." Across the city, I sat in Sullivan's executive conference room, reviewing integration plans. Nobody mentioned the video. Nobody asked me whether I was okay. Nobody treated me like damaged goods. They treated me like what I had always been. An executive whose work had just changed the direction of an entire company. David Sullivan closed the folder in front of him. "I have one question." "I'm listening." "How quickly can your technology be integrated?" I looked around the room. 6 vice presidents, 2 engineers, head of operations. Nobody doubted whether I belonged there. "If everyone cooperates, 90 days. David smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." One of the engineering directors leaned forward. "We've reviewed your modular combustion system. I have to admit, I thought the marketing material was exaggerating." "It wasn't." He laughed. "It definitely wasn't." Another executive added. "The software behind your inventory prediction model is years ahead of what we expected." For the first time in a very long time, people were talking about my work. Not my father's company, not Tyler's promotion. My work. Back at Lawson Outdoor Living, Karen entered the conference room again. She looked even more nervous. "Grant, I'm sorry. Our customer service department says they're overwhelmed." "With what?" She swallowed. "Calls." "What kind of calls?" She hesitated. "Customers, suppliers, the local newspaper, 2 television stations, the Chamber of Commerce." Grant stared at her. "And?" "They all want a statement." Robert looked toward Grant. "You should probably issue one." Grant shook his head immediately. "I'm not apologizing publicly." Nobody reacted. The attorney quietly made another note. 20 minutes later, the board meeting resumed. This time, the discussion wasn't about Brooke. It was about risk. "Our insurance carrier has requested information. Our employment practices attorney recommends an internal investigation. Our largest investor has already asked whether Grant should remain acting CEO." Tyler looked stunned. Over one slap, the room turned toward him. Robert answered calmly. "No. Over everything that came after it." At exactly 11:58 a.m., Sullivan Outdoor Industries published the press release. Sullivin, Outdoor acquires award-winning patent portfolio created by engineer Brooke Lawson. 3 minutes later, trade magazines picked up the story, then industry blogs, then business reporters. The article wasn't about family drama. It was about innovation, about engineering, about intellectual property, about a woman whose technology had quietly transformed an entire market. One sentence appeared in nearly every publication. Lawson Outdoor Living will no longer retain exclusive rights to the technology responsible for its fastest-growing product line. Inside Lawson headquarters, every executive's phone vibrated almost simultaneously. The CFO looked first, then slowly closed his eyes. Grant noticed. What now? The CFO turned the screen toward him. Our stockholders have seen the announcement. Grant read it once, then again. His face became completely expressionless. Tyler grabbed another phone from the table. What does this mean? The answer came from company counsel. It means Brooke didn't simply resign. She joined the competition. Tyler stood up so quickly his chair rolled backward. She can't. She signed a non-compete. Counsel shook his head. No. She negotiated an exception. When? 7 years ago. Grant felt something sink inside his chest. Another contract. Another document. Another page he had never bothered reading because Brooke had always been the dependable one. Dependable people didn't leave. Dependable people didn't fight back. Dependable people certainly didn't prepare escape routes years in advance. Except, she had. My assistant knocked softly on my temporary office. Miss Lawson? Yes? Your LinkedIn profile. I frowned. What about it? She smiled. I think you'll want to see it. I opened the page. Thousands of new connection requests. Messages from engineers, recruiters, former coworkers, even employees who still worked for Lawson Outdoor Living. One message caught my attention. I'm sorry we stayed quiet. We all knew who really built that company. Another. Watching that video made me realize how many times we watched them disrespect you without saying anything. Another. If you ever build your own company, I'd like to work for you. I read them slowly, not because they erased the pain. Nothing could erase what had happened. But for years, I had been told I wasn't respected outside the Lawson name. Now people who owed me nothing were reaching out because of my own. Back inside the Lawson boardroom, Grant's phone rang. The caller ID displayed one name. Harrison Retail Group, their biggest customer. He answered immediately. Mark. There was no greeting, only a cold voice. I just watched the video. Grant closed his eyes. Mark. We've done business for 18 years. I know, and I'm disappointed. Grant tried to interrupt. It isn't that simple. No, it actually is. Silence. Mark continued. My legal department has already reviewed today's acquisition announcement. Grant's heartbeat accelerated. What does that have to do with? It has everything to do with it. You lost the engineer. You lost the patents. And judging by that video, you lost the judgment required to run this company. Grant gripped the phone tighter. What are you saying? I'm saying, our board voted 30 minutes ago. We're suspending all new purchase orders until further notice. Grant felt the blood drain from his face. Mark. Don't do this. I already did. The line went dead. Nobody asked what had happened. They already knew. The color in Grant Lawson's face had answered for him. Robert slowly stood, then looked around the room. I think it's time we discuss whether this company can survive. He paused. With its current leadership. For the first time in 32 years, Grant Lawson wasn't the man leading the meeting anymore. He was the subject of it. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, the board had reached a decision. Not a final one, but one Grant Lawson never imagined hearing. Robert looked across the table. Pending the outcome of our investigation, the board is removing your authority to approve any transaction exceeding $50,000. Grant stared at him. You can't be serious. We are. I built this company. Robert didn't raise his voice. You also placed it in this position. Grant looked toward the other directors. One by one, they avoided his eyes. Not because they hated him, because numbers don't care about loyalty. The patents were gone. The licensing agreements were gone. Their largest customer had suspended orders. The bank was reviewing their credit facilities. And every hour, the video collected another 100,000 views. The company wasn't facing a public relations problem anymore. It was facing a survival problem. Tyler couldn't accept it. The moment the meeting ended, he cornered Robert outside the conference room. This is ridiculous. She's manipulating everyone. Robert sighed. No, Tyler. She's prepared. There's a difference. My father trusted her. Robert looked at him for several seconds. No, he underestimated her. Those words followed Tyler all the way to the parking garage. For years, he believed Brooke had stayed because she needed the family. He was only now realizing she had stayed because she loved them. And there was a huge difference between those two things. At Sullivan Outdoor, I spent the afternoon reviewing engineering schedules. The atmosphere couldn't have been more different. People interrupted each other with ideas. Engineers argued over improvements instead of titles. Nobody cared whose last name appeared on the office door. They cared whose solution worked. I had almost forgotten what that felt like. My assistant knocked gently. Brooke? There's someone downstairs. I frowned. I don't have any appointments, he says. She hesitated. He's your brother. I wasn't surprised. I had been expecting him, just not this quickly. Tyler was waiting in the lobby. No expensive smile, no beer in his hand, no audience. Amazing how much confidence disappears when there isn't a father standing beside you. He stood as I approached. We need to talk. I don't. It'll only take 5 minutes. I've already given you 7 years. His shoulders stiffened. Please, that word sounded strange coming from him. I nodded toward a quiet seating area. 5 minutes. He sat down first, for several seconds. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he leaned forward. Dad made a mistake. I almost smiled. A mistake. He lost his temper. He hit me. I know. And? He shouldn't have. I waited. He looked uncomfortable. You know he isn't like that. I looked directly into his eyes. No, Tyler. He's exactly like that. The only difference is that this time everyone was watching. He looked away. He pulled a folded document from his jacket. I brought something. I didn't touch it. What is it? A new agreement. I'm not signing anything. Just look. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It took less than 10 seconds to understand. Board seat. Profit participation. Executive vice president. Retention bonus. Stock options. Everything. Everything they had refused to give me for years. Everything they suddenly believed could buy me back. I closed the folder. This is generous. His face brightened slightly. So, no. The hope disappeared immediately. You didn't even think about it. I did. For 7 years. Tyler rubbed his forehead. What do you want? The question almost made me laugh. For my entire life, nobody had asked that. Not Dad, not Mom, not Tyler. Only now, when they were losing everything. What do I want? Yes, I leaned back. I wanted Dad to acknowledge my work. Silence. I wanted Mom to stop asking me to sacrifice everything just to keep peace. Another silence. I wanted my brother to stop presenting my ideas as his own. Tyler lowered his head. I wanted one family dinner where nobody compared us. My voice remained calm. I wanted one promotion that wasn't followed by Tyler receiving the credit. I wanted one birthday where Dad didn't spend the entire evening talking about your future. He whispered. I didn't know. You never wanted to know. He looked genuinely shaken. I can fix this. No, I'll tell everyone. No, I'll resign. No, I'll tell Dad to apologize. I slowly shook my head. Tyler, this stopped being about apologies the moment Dad raised his hand. He swallowed. So that's it? No, that's just where it became irreversible. He looked at me for a long time, then quietly asked, Did you ever actually want the company? I smiled sadly. No, I wanted to build things. The company just happened to be where I built them. He frowned. Then why didn't you leave years ago? The answer came without effort. Because I kept believing next year would be different. Next promotion. Next project. Next Christmas. Next birthday. I thought eventually, Dad would choose having a daughter over having a favorite child. Tyler closed his eyes. He never did. No, he chose you. Every single time. His phone vibrated. He ignored it, then vibrated again. And again. Finally he checked the screen. The color left his face. What? He turned the display toward me. An industry newsletter. Sullivan Outdoor Industries to unveil next-generation modular technology at the National Outdoor Living Expo this Friday. Beneath the headline, a promotional image. Me. Standing beside David Sullivan. Lead presentation by Brooke Lawson. Chief Innovation Officer. Tyler stared at the screen. You. They already announced you? I nodded. They're proud of what I built. He whispered almost to himself. Dad's going to lose his mind. I stood. Our 5 minutes are over. He remained seated, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Just before I turned away, he asked one final question. Do you hate us? I stopped walking, thought about it, then answered honestly. No. I just stopped loving you more than I loved myself. I left him sitting alone in the lobby, still holding the agreement nobody would ever sign. Upstairs, my assistant met me at the elevator. Everything okay? I looked back once. Tyler hadn't moved. No, I said quietly. But for the first time in years, it finally will be. Across town, Grant Lawson had just received the expo announcement. He slammed his office door so hard the glass walls shook. Because he had finally realized something terrifying. Brooke wasn't simply leaving his company. She was about to stand on the biggest stage in the industry and show the entire market exactly what Lawson Outdoor Living had lost. Thursday morning, Lawson Outdoor Living no longer felt like the company I had left 4 days earlier. It felt like a building waiting for bad news. Employees whispered in hallways. Managers closed office doors before speaking. Even the receptionist who had worked there for 20 years kept refreshing business websites instead of answering personal emails. Everyone was waiting, not for a miracle, for the next loss. Grant hadn't slept. Karen noticed the moment he walked into the office. His tie hung loose. His eyes were bloodshot. Coffee stained the sleeve of his jacket. She had worked beside him for 12 years. She had never seen him look old before. Good morning. He didn't answer. Instead, he threw a folder onto his desk. How many resignations? Karen hesitated. 9. He looked up sharply. 9. Since yesterday afternoon. Who? She handed him the list. Engineering, product development, purchasing, quality assurance. Every department Brooke had quietly built over the years. Grant read each name slowly. They're following her. Karen chose her words carefully. I think, 9. They're following the person they believed in. He looked at her. For just a second, she thought he might fire her. Instead, he looked back at the paper. Tyler wasn't doing much better. He sat alone in his office, surrounded by reports he didn't understand. Supplier forecasts, manufacturing schedules, licensing renewals, engineering approvals. For years, he had believed Brooke exaggerated how complicated everything was. Now every document seemed written in another language. His assistant knocked. You have 3 department heads waiting. Send them in. 3 managers entered. None of them smiled. The first spoke immediately. We need approval on the Arizona production line. Tyler nodded confidently. Fine. The second manager frowned. It isn't that simple. Why not? Because Brooke negotiated the tooling specifications personally. We don't know which version she finalized. Tyler looked at the next report. What about this one? Another uncomfortable silence. Brooke handled that too. And this? Also Brooke. And this? Brooke. Within 3 minutes, he realized something nobody had ever dared tell him. He wasn't leading the division. He had never actually learned it. Across town, my first week at Sullivan felt almost unreal. Not because it was easy, because it was honest. When someone disagreed with my proposal, they explained why. When I solved a problem, people said thank you. No one looked toward another room to decide who deserved the credit. David entered carrying a tablet. You should probably see this. He handed it to me. An article. Former Lawson employees continue joining Sullivan following leadership crisis. Below it, photos of engineers I had worked beside for years, people who had quietly endured the same culture I had. David sat across from me. I didn't recruit any of them. I know. They contacted us. I nodded. I figured they would. He studied me for a moment. You don't seem surprised. I'm not. They weren't staying because of Grant. They were staying because they believed I could keep protecting them. David slowly smiled. And now? I don't work there anymore. That afternoon, Grant received another call from the board. Emergency meeting. Again. This time, there was no discussion, only decisions. Robert opened with a single sentence. We've completed our preliminary review. Grant crossed his arms. And the results aren't encouraging. The company attorney slid another folder across the table. Over the last 6 years, Brooke Lawson appears to have been listed as secondary contributor on 23 internal innovation reports. Grant frowned. So? Counsel opened another page. Our interviews indicate she was actually the primary creator on every one of them. Grant looked toward Tyler. Tyler couldn't even lift his head. The attorney continued. In several cases, internal emails show employees were instructed to replace Brooke's name with Tyler's before presentations. Silence. Grant's heartbeat accelerated. He remembered those meetings. He remembered saying, "It'll be better if clients think Tyler is leading this." At the time, it had sounded harmless. Now, written on paper, it looked exactly like what it was: fraud. Robert leaned forward. "I need to ask you something directly." Grant nodded once. "Did you knowingly allow your son to receive public credit for Brooke's work?" Grant didn't answer, because every answer available was terrible. If he said no, the emails proved otherwise. If he said yes, the board would know the deception had lasted years. His silence became the answer. Robert quietly removed his glasses. "I never imagined we'd reach this point." Neither had Grant. Friday morning, the National Outdoor Living Expo opened its doors. More than 8,000 industry professionals filled the convention center: manufacturers, retailers, architects, investors, journalists. The biggest event of the year. For the first time in my career, I wasn't attending from the shadows. My name appeared on the main presentation screen: Brooke Lawson, Chief Innovation Officer, Sullivan Outdoor Industries. I stood backstage reviewing my slides. An assistant clipped a microphone to my jacket. "Nervous?" I smiled. "A little." David laughed. "Good. It means you still care." At exactly the same moment, Grant was driving toward the convention center. Tyler sat beside him. "Dad, this is a mistake." "No. We need to talk to her." "Not like this." Grant gripped the steering wheel harder. "She's destroying everything." Tyler looked out the window. "No," he said quietly. "I think we already did." Grant ignored him. His phone buzzed again. "Robert." He declined the call. Another message arrived. "Do not create additional legal exposure." Grant locked the screen without reading the rest. For the first time in decades, he wasn't listening to lawyers. He wasn't listening to the board. He wasn't even listening to his own son. He only wanted one thing: to stop Brooke. Even if it meant confronting her in front of the entire industry. He had no idea that hundreds of cameras were already waiting inside. Or that this confrontation would become the moment every remaining ally finally walked away from him. The auditorium was full. More than 1,000 people filled the seats. Executives, retail buyers, architects, manufacturers, industry reporters. The lights dimmed. My presentation title appeared across the giant screen: "The Future of Modular Outdoor Living." David introduced me with a smile. "I've spent 30 years acquiring companies." He paused. "But today, I'm introducing someone whose ideas mattered more than any acquisition we've ever made." Applause echoed through the room. I walked onto the stage. For just a second, I remembered another crowd. Plastic tables, paper plates. My father's hand across my face. The same woman stood on both stages. Only one thing had changed. I finally believed my own worth. "Good afternoon. My name is Brooke Lawson. And for most of my career, people knew my last name before they knew my work." A few people smiled. "I'd like to change that today." The first slide appeared. Patents, engineering drawings, prototype photos. Not one mention of Lawson Outdoor Living. Only the technology, exactly as it should have been years earlier. Outside the auditorium, Grant pushed through the registration area. 2 event staff members stepped in front of him. "Sir, the presentation has already started." "I know. I need to speak with Brooke Lawson." "I'm sorry. You'll need to wait." Grant continued walking. Tyler grabbed his arm. "Dad, stop." Grant pulled away. "No. I'm ending this today." Tyler looked around nervously. People were beginning to recognize them. Some whispered. Others stared. A reporter quietly lifted her phone. Inside, I had just finished explaining the new combustion system. Questions began immediately. An engineer from Colorado raised his hand. What inspired the airflow redesign? I smiled. A very expensive mistake, the audience laughed. My brother once ordered the wrong materials, so I redesigned the entire system around what we already had. More laughter. No bitterness, just the truth. Then another question, how long did it take? Almost 3 years. Were you leading a large engineering team? No. I was leading myself. Several people nodded. They understood exactly what that meant. The rear doors suddenly burst open. The sound echoed through the auditorium. Heads turned. Grant Lawson strode inside. Tyler followed several steps behind. My heart skipped once, then settled. Not because I wasn't afraid, because I had expected this. Grant pointed directly at the stage. There she is. Murmurs spread instantly. David stood. Event security started moving. Grant ignored them. You've embarrassed this family long enough. Every camera in the room turned toward him. I remained exactly where I was. He reached the front row. You've made your point. Now end this. Nobody spoke. He looked around the auditorium. This presentation, those patents, that company, they exist because I gave you everything. I looked at him quietly, then asked one question. Everything? He nodded. Everything. I clicked the presentation remote. The screen behind me changed, not to another product, to a timeline. Every patent, every filing date, every registered inventor, every engineering award. Every document carried exactly one name. Brooke Lawson. No edits, no accusations, only public records. I looked back at my father. Show me where your name appears. The room became completely silent. Grant stared at the screen. One patent, then another, then another. Nothing. No Grant Lawson, no Tyler Lawson, only me. He pointed toward the screen. Those belong to my company. No. They belong to the person who created them. He took another step. I paid your salary. You delayed it. I gave you opportunities. You gave Tyler promotions. I built your career. I slowly shook my head. You built your version of my career. A reporter in the front row typed furiously. Another camera zoomed closer. Grant finally noticed. He turned toward the audience. You don't know her. You don't know what she's like. No, an older retailer stood up. We know exactly what we watched online. Another voice came from the opposite side. And we know whose name is on the patents. Another. And we know who just explained the technology. The support didn't come from friends. It came from strangers, professionals, people with nothing to gain. Grant looked around in disbelief. For decades, his title had ended every argument. Today, nobody cared about his title, only the truth. Security finally reached him. Sir, we need you to leave. Grant pulled his arm away. I'm talking to my daughter. I answered before security could. No, I said calmly. You're talking at me. You stopped talking to me years ago. The words landed harder than I expected. Even Tyler closed his eyes. Grant's shoulders sagged for just a moment. Then the anger returned. You owe this family. I smiled sadly. I paid that debt. For 7 years, with my work. My weekends, my ideas, my silence. I don't owe you anything anymore. The auditorium erupted into applause. Not loud at first. Just scattered claps. Then more, then dozens, then hundreds. Grant stood frozen. The applause wasn't celebrating me. It was rejecting everything he represented. Security gently guided him toward the exit. This time, he didn't fight. Halfway to the door, he looked back one last time. For years, he believed my greatest fear was losing the Lawson name. Standing on that stage, surrounded by people who respected me because of my work, he finally understood. The Lawson name had never been my greatest strength. It had been the heaviest weight I ever carried. The doors closed behind him. The applause slowly faded. I looked at the audience, took one steady breath, then smiled. Now, as I was saying, the room laughed softly, and I finished the presentation that should have carried my name from the very beginning. Less than 1 hour later, while journalists surrounded me outside the auditorium, Grant Lawson received one final phone call. Robert Ellis. The board has voted. Grant already knew. Even before answering, everything was about to end. Grant answered on the second ring. Robert didn't waste a single second. The vote is complete. Grant closed his eyes. And? You've been removed as Chief Executive Officer effective immediately. Silence. No anger, no shouting, just silence. Robert continued. Your position on the board has also been suspended pending the conclusion of the investigation. Grant finally found his voice. You can't do that. We already did. My family built that company. No, Robert answered quietly. You built the company. Brooke built what kept it alive. The line went dead. Grant lowered the phone without moving. For the first time in 32 years, he was unemployed. Tyler stood beside him outside the convention center. Dad. Grant didn't answer. We'll appeal. Nothing. We'll sue. Still nothing. We can tell everyone Brooke planned this. Grant slowly looked at his son. There was no anger left in his eyes, only exhaustion. Do you even know what we'd be suing her for? Tyler opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Grant looked away again. Because for the first time, he understood something he had refused to admit for years. Every legal document, every patent, every contract, every decision Brooke had made, had been cleaner than his own. Monday morning, the company issued its official statement. Grant Lawson is no longer serving as CEO of Lawson Outdoor Living. Robert Ellis appointed interim chief executive officer. The announcement spread through the industry within minutes. Employees stopped whispering. Now, they talked openly. One warehouse supervisor shook his head. I always thought Brooke was the one running product. A purchasing manager answered. She was. We just weren't supposed to say it. Another employee quietly admitted. Every time Tyler gave us an idea, we already knew it had come from Brooke. For years, fear had kept everyone silent. Now, fear had changed sides. The board held one more meeting that afternoon. Tyler arrived wearing his best suit. His shoulders were straight, his chin high. He still believed this could be saved. Robert welcomed him politely. Please sit. Tyler remained standing. I'd like to present my plan. Robert exchanged a glance with the other directors. You may. Tyler connected his laptop. The first slide appeared. Lawson Recovery Strategy. He spoke confidently. We'll rebuild customer confidence. We'll increase production. We'll launch 3 new product lines. Halfway through the presentation, the engineering director raised his hand. Who designed them? Tyler hesitated. Our engineering department. Who specifically? Silence. Another director asked. Which supplier agreed to manufacture the new combustion system? Tyler searched his notes. I'll confirm that. The CFO asked the next question. Your projected margins depend on Brooke's inventory software. What replaces it? Tyler swallowed. We're exploring alternatives. Another silence. Robert gently closed the laptop. Thank you. Tyler looked around hopefully. So, Robert spoke with genuine kindness. Tyler, you don't actually understand the business you're trying to save. Those words hurt more than shouting ever could. Because everyone in that room knew. They were true. That evening, I sat on my back porch watching the sun disappear behind the trees. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't filled with emergencies. No supplier crisis, no payroll issue, no frantic calls from Dad demanding I fix another disaster. Just silence. Peace. My assistant had insisted I take the afternoon off after the expo. I finally understood why. Life felt strangely light when you stopped carrying people who refused to carry themselves. My phone buzzed. Not Dad, not Mom. Paige, can I tell you something? I smiled. Of course. She replied almost immediately. After you left the barbecue, everyone talked about the slap. Nobody defended Uncle Grant. They were just too scared to say it while he was there. Another message appeared. I should have stood beside you. I'm sorry. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then answered. Thank you for finally telling the truth. That was enough. I didn't need revenge against every person who stayed silent. Some people only needed the courage they should have found years earlier. Across town, Grant sat alone inside his office. Technically, it wasn't his office anymore. The board had given him 48 hours to remove his belongings. Family photographs, awards, old company plaques, a framed newspaper clipping from 20 years earlier, Lawson Outdoor opened second lay contain. He picked it up, smiled sadly, then noticed something. The article mentioned everyone involved: him, investors, suppliers, employees. There was even one sentence about a young engineering student who had just joined the company after college. Grant's daughter, Brooke Lawson, recently joined the business and is expected to assist with future product development. Expected to assist. He laughed quietly. Even then, she had never been helping. She had been building. He simply hadn't seen it. Or perhaps, he never wanted to. Tuesday evening, someone knocked on my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it. Grant Lawson stood there. No tailored suit, no company logo, no expensive watch, just jeans, a wrinkled button-down shirt, and eyes that looked 20 years older than the last time I'd seen him. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked directly at me. Not as a CEO, not as the head of the Lawson family, not even as the man who had slapped me. Just as a father who had run out of power. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Brooke, I need your help." And for the first time in my entire life, those words didn't make me feel guilty. They made me wonder whether he was finally too late. Grant stood on my front porch. For years, I had imagined this moment differently. I thought if my father ever came looking for me, it would be because he finally realized he loved me. Instead, he came because he had run out of options. Neither of us spoke. The evening air was cool. Somewhere across the street, a lawn sprinkler clicked back and forth. Normal sounds. An ordinary neighborhood, completely disconnected from the storm my family had created. Finally, I stepped aside. "You can come in." He hesitated, almost as if entering my home meant accepting that he no longer had the authority to summon me into his. He walked inside quietly. His eyes moved around the room, the framed engineering awards on the bookshelf, the prototype sitting on the coffee table, the photographs from conferences he had never attended. He frowned. "I've never been here." "No. You never asked." That sentence landed harder than I expected. He lowered his eyes. "I guess I didn't." I offered him a seat. He remained standing. "I won't take much of your time. You already took most of my life." He closed his eyes for a moment. "I deserve that." It was the first time my father had admitted I was right. He finally sat down. His shoulders looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally. "I need you to help save the company." There it was. No apology, no acknowledgement, no daughter. Just the company. I leaned back. "Do you know what the first thing you asked me after you slapped me was?" He looked confused. "No. You told me to sign." His face tightened. "I know. No. You remember. You still don't understand." Silence. "You never asked if I was hurt. You never asked if I was okay. You never even asked why I refused." His breathing slowed. "I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I looked directly at him. "You forgot my birthdays. You missed my college graduation because Tyler had a golf tournament. You introduced me to clients as the one who keeps things organized. You thanked Tyler for products I invented. You paid him bonuses for contracts I negotiated. Those weren't mistakes. Those were choices." Every sentence pushed him further into his chair. "I know I favored Tyler." The words came quietly. "I thought." He stopped. I waited. "I thought he needed me more." I smiled sadly. "And what did you think I needed?" He didn't answer, because there was no answer. For years, he had convinced himself I was stronger, more responsible, more dependable. So every sacrifice became mine. Every opportunity became Tyler's. I never stopped needing a father. His eyes filled for the first time. Not dramatic tears, just quiet regret, the kind that arrives years too late. He swallowed hard. "If you come back, I'll step down. You can run everything." I almost laughed. "You still don't understand." He frowned. "This isn't about the title. I don't want your office. I don't want your parking space. I don't want your company. I wanted your respect. And that's the one thing you can't hand me now." Silence settled between us. Heavy. Unavoidable. The doorbell rang. Grant looked toward the hallway. So did I. I opened the door. Tyler stood there. Behind him, Mom, Neither of them looked surprised to see Dad's truck. They had followed him. Mom stepped inside first. Her eyes immediately landed on the fading mark that still remained on my cheek. She looked away. She still couldn't face what she had allowed to happen. "Brooke." Her voice trembled. "I'm sorry." I nodded politely. She waited. When I didn't answer, she continued. "I should have stopped him. Yes. I should have defended you. Yes, I should have chosen you." That one hung in the air. Because she hadn't, not once. Not when Dad ignored me, not when Tyler mocked me, not when promotions disappeared, not when bonuses became his, not even when Dad slapped me. She covered her mouth. "I don't know how to fix this." "You can't." Tyler stepped forward carrying another folder. I couldn't help smiling. "You really like paperwork." He looked embarrassed. "This isn't another contract." "What is it?" He handed it to me. I opened it. A resignation letter. Signed. Effective immediately. I resigned. I looked up. "Why?" He answered honestly. "Because everyone knows." "What?" "That I wasn't the one running the company." There was no arrogance left. No excuses. Only shame. I spent years believing I deserved everything Dad gave me. He looked down at his own hands. "I never asked why every problem somehow ended up on your desk. I never wanted to know." Mom began crying quietly. Grant stared at the floor. The room felt strangely calm. Nobody was shouting. Nobody was blaming. The truth no longer needed volume. It simply existed. Tyler looked back at me. "I'll tell the board everything. I'll tell them whose ideas they were. I'll tell them about the presentations, the emails, the promotions. Everything." I believed him, not because he had suddenly become a better man, because lying no longer benefited him. Grant finally spoke again. "If the board asks you to come back, will you?" "No." He looked up slowly. "Not even if the company fails?" I answered without hesitation. "The company isn't failing because I left. It's failing because for years, you taught everyone that loyalty mattered more than competence. You rewarded ego. You punished honesty. You promoted the wrong people. And every time someone warned you, you called it family business." He closed his eyes. Every word was true, and truth hurts most when you've spent years avoiding it. Nobody spoke for almost a full minute. Finally, Grant stood. He looked around my living room one last time. The awards, the blueprints, the life I'd built without him. "I really believed you'd always come back." I walked him to the door. "I know." He stopped before stepping outside. Without turning around, he quietly asked, "When did I lose you?" I didn't answer immediately. Because the truth wasn't the day he slapped me, or the day he promoted Tyler, or the day he ignored another achievement. It happened much earlier. "You didn't lose me at the barbecue," I said softly. "You lost me every time you watched me carry this family and thanked someone else." He stood perfectly still, then nodded once. Not because he accepted it, because he finally knew it was true. He walked toward his truck without looking back. I watched the three of them drive away together. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty watching my family leave. I simply closed the door. The next morning, the Lawson Outdoor Living Board would receive a package from Tyler. Inside were years of emails, internal presentations, drafts with my name removed, and enough evidence to expose every lie that had kept the family illusion alive. The final consequences were only beginning. 3 days later, Tyler kept his promise. He delivered everything, every internal email, every presentation draft, every engineering report, every document where my name disappeared, only to be replaced with his. The board didn't need investigators anymore. They had the truth, written in years of company records. Robert called me that afternoon. "I thought you should know." "I'm listening." "The investigation is over." I remained silent. He continued. "The board voted unanimously." I waited. "Grant Lawson has been permanently removed. No celebration, no satisfaction. Just closure." Robert wasn't finished. "We've also terminated Tyler's executive position." I understand. He accepted the decision. That didn't surprise me. Tyler had finally stopped fighting reality. "What happens now?" I asked. Robert let out a slow breath. "We're restructuring. We'll probably sell the company." Those words lingered. Sell the company. The business my grandfather had started in a rented warehouse. The company I had spent 7 years trying to protect. The company my father almost destroyed, trying to prove his son deserved it more than his daughter. Robert spoke again. I wanted to ask you something. I think I know. You do? You want me to buy it? A quiet laugh. I was hoping. I won't. There was a pause. May I ask why? I looked through my office window. Engineers were gathered around a prototype, debating improvements. Nobody cared whose idea had come first, only whether it worked. I already built one future. I'm not going back to rebuild a past. Robert understood immediately. I thought you might say that. The following month, Lawson Outdoor Living officially entered acquisition negotiations. Several companies submitted offers. None of them carried the Lawson name. Grant watched the announcement from the living room of the house he'd refinanced twice, trying to keep the business alive. The television reporter ended with one sentence. The company is expected to continue operating under new ownership later this year. No mention of Grant. No mention of Tyler. Just new ownership. The Lawson era was over. Mom called once. I answered. Not because I was ready, because healing sometimes begins with listening. I wanted you to know. She hesitated. I'm starting therapy. I smiled softly. I think that's a good idea. I spent years confusing peace with silence. Neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, I kept asking you to be the bigger person. I'm sorry. So was I. That conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. It wasn't enough to repair decades, but it was honest. For the first time, honesty was enough. Tyler sent one email. No excuses. No requests. Only 6 lines. I spent my whole life accepting things I never earned. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I finally understand why everyone respected you. I hope one day I become someone who deserves that too. I never replied. Not out of anger. Some journeys have to be walked alone. Grant never called again. Months later, I learned through Robert that he'd accepted a consulting job for a small regional manufacturer. No executive office, no reserved parking space, no assistants, just a desk, a computer, and people who didn't care what his last name used to mean. Robert told me something else. He's quieter now. I imagine he is. He talks about you. I looked up. What does he say? Robert smiled sadly. He tells people, the smartest person I ever hired was my own daughter. I thanked him for telling me. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. Those words would have meant everything to the woman I used to be. Not anymore. Some apologies arrive after they've lost the power to change the past. 6 months later, Sullivan Outdoor held its annual summer barbecue. Someone laughed when they realized the coincidence. We're celebrating with barbecue after everything you've been through. I laughed too. This one's a little different. Children ran across the grass. Engineers argued over recipes instead of budgets. Designers competed to build the best outdoor kitchen display. Nobody shouted. Nobody demanded credit. Nobody was afraid. David walked over carrying 2 plates. You know, I've been meaning to ask. What? Why did you finally accept my offer? I looked across the yard. The smell of charcoal drifted through the warm evening air. People smiled because they wanted to. Not because they were pretending everything was fine. Then I answered. My father thought the slap was the moment he put me back in my place. David nodded quietly. But it wasn't. No, it was the moment I finally realized I deserved a better place. He raised his glass. To better places. I smiled. To better people. We clinked our glasses. As the sun began to set, I watched everyone around me. No one expected me to stay quiet. No one expected me to shrink so someone else could shine. No one expected me to earn love by sacrificing myself. The family barbecue where my father slapped me wasn't the day I lost everything. It was the day I stopped confusing obedience with love. My father thought one slap would remind me who had the power. Instead, it reminded me that power was never the ability to control someone. It was having the courage to walk away from the people who believed they owned you. And the moment I walked through that gate, I didn't lose my family. I left behind the version of family that had demanded my silence. That was the last time anyone ever raised a hand to me. Not because I became stronger overnight, but because I finally learned something my grandfather had tried to teach me years before. The people who truly love you never ask you to become smaller so they can feel bigger. And once you understand that, no one can ever make you believe you're worth less than what you've built.